Imagine this. Two little children slipping into the raging sea, their cries swallowed by the roaring waves. And in that heart-stopping moment, when everyone froze in shock, it wasn't the millionaire father or the yacht's crew, but a simple maid who leapt without hesitation. Risking her own life, she fought against the furious tide, determined to pull the children back from the grip of death. This is not just a story of wealth and privilege, it is a story of courage, sacrifice, and the power of love that can even defeat death itself. Stay with us until the very end, because the final moment of this story will leave you speechless. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and click the bell icon so you never miss another story. And let us know in the comments, what country are you watching this video from? The late afternoon sun glistened across the Long Island Sound, its golden light shimmering against the surface of the water as the Harrington family's pristine white yacht swayed gently in the marina. The polished brass railings gleamed, and the scent of salt mixed with the faint aroma of expensive perfume that still lingered from the night before, when Danielle Harrington had hosted another one of her carefully curated social dinners. Downstairs, in the main lounge, Emily Carter bent to retrieve a porcelain doll. The doll had tumbled to the carpet, its fragile painted face reflecting the light like cracked moonlight. Emily turned it over in her hands, inspecting it carefully. No chips, no broken pieces. Relief washed over her as she whispered, "Still perfect." Her hands, rough from years of dishwashing and cleaning cheap diners in Queens, looked startlingly out of place, holding something so delicate. She glanced to her right. Behind a leather armchair, 5-year-old Grace was curled up, her small shoulders trembling. She was trying to hide her tears, the way a child does when they already know their emotions are an inconvenience. Emily crouched low, her voice warm, soothing, the way her mother's had been with her when she was small. "Shh, sweetheart, it's okay. Look, your doll's fine." She was just a little scared, the same way you were. Grace lifted her head, strands of golden hair sticking to her damp cheeks. Her bright blue eyes were rimmed with red, her bottom lip quivering. "Mommy Danielle says I'm too clumsy. She says kids like me don't deserve nice things, that I ruin them." The words stabbed through Emily's chest like a cold knife. For a moment, she was back in her childhood apartment in Brooklyn, a tiny space filled with laughter and chaos, where her mother Rosa used to tell her and her siblings, "Children don't earn love. They live inside it." Rosa had worked long shifts at a laundromat, but still found time to kiss every scraped knee, sing lullabies that drowned out the sounds of traffic, and make even the cheapest dinner feel like a feast. Emily pulled in a slow breath, steadying herself. She slid down to sit cross-legged on the soft cream carpet, opening her arms. Grace crept into her lap, her tiny body trembling against Emily's chest. "My mom used to sing me a song when I felt like this," Emily said softly. "It always made me feel better." "Want to hear it?" Grace sniffled, nodding. From the doorway, another presence lingered. Grace's twin brother Henry stood half in the shadows, as if uncertain whether he was allowed to step inside such tenderness. His hair was the same golden shade, but his eyes, hazel and serious, belonged to someone much older than 5. "You can come too." "Henry," Emily said, her voice gentle, coaxing. The boy hesitated, then padded quietly across the carpet, sitting stiffly beside them. Emily smiled and began to hum. Her voice, though untrained, carried a softness that filled the cabin with warmth. The tune was simple, a folk song Rosa had sung countless times, a song about a little paper boat sailing bravely across calm waters, carrying the dreams of children who needed peace. Grace's small fingers twined in Emily's hair, her breathing slowly steadying. Henry leaned into her side, his lashes lowering for the first time in days, as if he finally allowed himself to just be a child. Upstairs, Richard Harrington, the powerful investment mogul whose name graced Wall Street headlines, sat at a mahogany desk cluttered with financial reports. His tie was loosened, his brow furrowed as he studied charts, numbers, projections, distractions he clung to. But then he heard it, a sound he hadn't heard in years, laughter. Quiet at first, then genuine. His children's laughter, Curiosity tugged at him. He rose, following the sound down the spiral staircase, from the shadows at the entrance of the lounge. He stopped, frozen by the sight. Emily, in her plain navy uniform, hair tied back in an unpretentious ponytail, sat on the carpet with his children nestled against her. She was singing softly, her voice a balm. The children, his children, who had grown stiff and anxious under Danielle's rigid rules, looked completely at ease, wrapped in a cocoon of warmth that money could never buy. Henry cracked open his eyes, and when he spotted his father, embarrassment flooded his face. He pulled back quickly, muttering, "Daddy," as if ashamed to be caught seeking comfort. "Don't get up." Richard surprised himself with the gentleness of his own voice. "The song, it's beautiful." Emily's cheeks flushed crimson. She shifted as if to stand, but Grace clung desperately to her blouse. "Don't go, Miss Emily, please stay." Richard's lips curved into something he hadn't managed in months, a real smile. He opened his mouth to speak again, but before he could, the sharp staccato of heels echoed down the staircase. Danielle Harrington descended like a queen claiming her throne. Dressed in a tailored white designer dress, every strand of her platinum hair perfectly in place, her ruby lipstick immaculate, she was the picture of icy perfection. Her gaze swept over the tableau. Emily on the carpet, his children clinging to her, Richard watching with softened eyes. Her voice was sweet, but the steel beneath it was unmistakable. "What's happening here?" "Emily was singing to them," Richard answered simply. Danielle's smile tightened. She tilted her head, her eyes narrowing just enough to convey her displeasure. "I see. Children, isn't it time for your baths?" "But she was telling us about the fish in the ocean." Grace's voice was small but pleading. "Emily has other tasks to complete," Danielle replied coolly, descending the last steps with deliberate grace. "Children need order, structure." The warmth in the room seemed to drain instantly. Emily swallowed, forcing a steady voice. "She's right. Bath time now, but..." She leaned closer to the twins, whispering, "Sir, I'll finish the story later, promise." Henry caught her hand. "Promise?" "Promise," she whispered back. Danielle's gaze hardened. She had worked relentlessly to secure her place by Richard's side after his wife's death 2 years ago, positioning herself as indispensable to both his personal life and his business empire. She had no intention of letting some young maid dismantle that plan with a few songs and gentle words. "Emily," Danielle said sweetly, though her eyes were like ice, "would you mind organizing my closet this evening? There are pieces I'll need for tomorrow's gala." "Of course, ma'am," Emily replied politely, though her stomach tightened. As the twins reluctantly shuffled upstairs, Emily began picking up their scattered toys. Her movements were efficient, careful, almost reverent. She placed the porcelain doll on a high shelf with tender precision, as though she understood that these objects were more than possessions. They were anchors for children adrift. Richard lingered, watching her. "Emily," he said softly. She straightened. "Yes, Mr. Harrington." "Thank you. For the children." His voice cracked just slightly. They've been through a lot since their mother passed." Emily paused, her eyes meeting his. "They're wonderful kids," she said sincerely. "They just need to feel loved." For a moment, Richard saw something in her eyes that startled him. Authenticity, the kind he hadn't seen in years. No calculations, no hidden agendas. Just kindness, pure and unguarded. Upstairs, unseen from below, Danielle stood at the landing, her manicured hand gripping the railing so tightly her knuckles whitened. Her eyes narrowed as she watched the scene. In Emily Carter she saw a threat she had never anticipated, one not of ambition but of heart, and Danielle knew, the most dangerous opponent is the one who doesn't even know she's playing the game. The next morning broke grey and heavy over the marina, the Long Island Sound, rippling beneath low clouds. Emily Carter stirred awake in the cramped staff cabin of the yacht, her back stiff from the narrow cot. She lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the yacht's generator and the occasional cry of a gull outside. It was hard to imagine that just above her, polished decks gleamed and rooms glistened with luxury. She hadn't slept much. Her thoughts had replayed the scene from the night before again. And again, Grace and Henry clinging to her. Danielle's icy eyes cutting through the warmth like a blade. Richard Harrington's unexpected smile. Emily had worked jobs since she was 16, cleaning offices, waiting tables, folding laundry in back rooms that smelled of bleach. But never before had she felt such a strong connection to strangers. The twins weren't strangers anymore. They had slipped into her heart as though they'd always belonged there. She rose quietly, washed her face in the tiny sink, and straightened her uniform. When she climbed the narrow stairs to the main deck, she heard voices drifting from the dining room. "Eat what's in front of you." Danielle's tone was sharp. "Clipped, but I don't like eggs," Grace whispered, her voice trembling. "You will eat them." Emily froze at the doorway, peering in unnoticed. The twins sat at the long dining table, plates of scrambled eggs untouched before them. Danielle stood by the head of the table in a silk robe, her arms crossed. Richard wasn't there. He had left at dawn for meetings in Manhattan. Henry's voice joined his sister's, tentative but firm. "Mommy used to make us pancakes." The scrape of a chair cut through the silence as Danielle leaned forward, her voice low and dangerous. "Your mother is gone, and in this house you will learn discipline. Whining doesn't bring people back." Emily felt her stomach knot. She stepped forward deliberately, forcing brightness into her tone. "Good morning." The twins looked up at her with eyes wide and desperate, as though she were a lifeline. Danielle turned slowly, her smile tight. "Emily, perfect timing. Perhaps you can explain to these children that food is not a game." Emily glanced at the plates, then at the children's faces. She thought of her mother, Rosa, who used to turn breakfast into a celebration, telling stories while flipping pancakes, laughing over spilled syrup. She took a careful breath. "Maybe we could try something different today. I know a recipe for pancakes shaped like stars." "The children might. They will eat what is in front of them," Danielle cut in sharply. Her tone was final. Grace's lips trembled. In the smallest voice she whispered, "I want pancakes." Danielle's eyes snapped to her, cold and glittering. "What did you just say?" Before Grace could stammer an apology, Henry placed his small hand over hers, his chin lifting in defiance. "We want pancakes, please." The room fell silent. Danielle's nostrils flared. "Enough! If you won't eat, you'll go without. Perhaps hunger will teach you respect." She reached for their plates as the children shrank back. Emily couldn't stop herself. "Ma'am, they're only 5, skipping meals." Danielle turned on her like a whip. "You are not here to parent them. You are here to clean." The words sliced through the air. The children flinched, staring at Emily with wide, fearful eyes. She steadied herself, swallowing her anger. "Of course," she murmured, lowering her gaze. "I'll see to the deck." She slipped from the room, but instead of heading for the deck, she went straight to the galley kitchen. Her hands moved quickly, almost on instinct, pulling flour, sugar, and milk from the cupboards. She found berries in the fridge, honey in a small jar. Within minutes, the scent of warm batter filled the air. When she returned to the deck with a covered basket, she called out brightly, "Grace! Henry! Would you like to see the seagulls with me?" Danielle hesitated, her eyes narrowing. But Richard might ask where the children were, and she couldn't risk seeming cruel. She waved her hand dismissively. 5 minutes. On the deck, outside, the sea breeze ruffled the twins' hair as Emily laid out a cloth and opened the basket. Inside were tiny pancakes shaped like stars, drizzled with honey, decorated with fruit cut into little flowers. The children gasped, eyes wide. "It's magic," Grace whispered. "No, sweetheart," Emily smiled, passing her a plate. "It's love. My mom used to say food made with love always tastes better." They devoured the pancakes eagerly. But Emily noticed the way Henry ate too quickly, his eyes darting to the door as though expecting someone to snatch his plate away. Grace chewed slowly, glancing toward the dining room with every bite, afraid Danielle might storm in at any moment. "Do you always eat like this?" Emily asked gently. Henry froze, then looked at his sister. Grace lowered her eyes, murmuring, "Mommy Danielle says food is a privilege. If we're bad, we don't deserve it." Emily's throat tightened. "Sweethearts," she whispered, kneeling to meet their eyes. "Food isn't a privilege. It's something every child deserves, no matter what." And love, too. But what if she gets mad? Grace's voice was barely audible. Emily brushed the girl's hair back tenderly. Then let me worry about that. You just be kids. For a moment, both children stared at her, as if weighing whether to believe. Then Henry threw his arms around her neck, holding tight. Grace followed, burying her face against Emily's shoulder. From the upper deck, unseen by any of them, Danielle stood at a window, her face twisted with fury. She had spent 2 years molding herself into Richard Harrington's perfect partner. She had carefully convinced him that his children needed strict order, not softness. Now this young woman, a housekeeper from Queens, was undoing all of that in a matter of days. Danielle's jaw clenched. She had underestimated Emily Carter. That mistake would not happen again. Emily didn't know it yet, but the bond she had just created with Grace and Henry would spark a quiet war inside that yacht. A war of love against control, of truth against appearances. And in the days to come, it would push every one of them, Richard, Danielle, Emily, and even the children, into choices that would change their lives forever. The following day began with the sky wrapped in a dull silver haze. The yacht swayed gently, its hull knocking softly against the marina's wooden posts. Emily Carter awoke before dawn. She hadn't slept much again. She had tossed and turned in her tiny cabin, haunted by Grace's whisper from the day before. Food is a privilege. If we're bad, we don't deserve it, her mother Rosa's voice echoed in her memory. Children are not soldiers, Emily, they're gardens. You water them with love, and they bloom. Emily splashed her face with cold water and looked into the cracked mirror above the sink. Her eyes were ringed with exhaustion, but behind them simmered something else, determination. She wouldn't let 2 small children wither in silence if she could help it. By 7, the household was stirring. Richard had already left in a car to Manhattan for a long day of meetings with investors. Danielle remained in her suite, on the phone with a stylist about her wardrobe for the upcoming gala. That left Emily with the children, though Danielle had made it clear the night before. Do not mistake kindness for authority. You are here to clean, Emily, not to raise them. But children didn't obey invisible walls. They clung to the person who gave them warmth, not the one who gave them orders. Emily found Grace and Henry in the playroom, sitting cross-legged on the carpet. Wooden blocks lay scattered around them, half-formed into the beginnings of a tower. Grace's eyes lit up when she saw Emily. You came back, she whispered, as though Emily had been gone for years instead of one night. Emily knelt beside them. Of course I came back. Did you think I wouldn't? Henry shrugged, his voice quiet. People leave. Mommy left. Then everyone leaves. Emily's heart tightened. She wanted to tell them she wasn't like the others, but promises like that had to be earned, not spoken. Instead, she picked up a block and added it carefully to their crooked tower. Well, I'm here now, and that's what matters. The morning passed in relative peace until the accident. Grace was running down the narrow corridor with a stuffed bear when she tripped over a stack of blocks Henry had left behind. She tumbled hard, skinning her knee against the polished wood. A scream tore from her throat. Emily rushed forward, scooping the child into her arms. Blood beaded on Grace's small knee, trickling in a bright red line. It's okay, baby, it's okay, Emily murmured, brushing Grace's hair back. It's just a scrape. We'll clean it and put on a pretty bandage. You'll be fine. Henry hovered nearby, wringing his hands. It was my fault. I left the blocks. I didn't mean... Emily reached out, pulling him into the circle of her arms too. Accidents happen. Nobody's in trouble. Do you hear me? But before she could carry Grace to the bathroom, a shadow fell across the hallway. Danielle appeared, her silk robe trailing behind her like armor. Her eyes flicked from the blood on Grace's knee to the children pressed tightly against Emily, then narrowed. What is this noise? She fell, Emily explained quickly. Just a scrape. I'll take care of... Enough dramatics, Danielle snapped. She stepped closer, her perfume overpowering, her voice sharp as glass. It's a scratch. Stop the crying, Grace. You're not a baby. Grace's sobs hitched, her body trembling harder as she tried to swallow the sound. She's in pain, Emily said softly but firmly. She's seeking attention, Danielle countered coldly. Children must learn resilience. If she cries over every scratch, how will she ever survive in this world? Henry's small voice trembled, but he spoke up. She's hurt. Mommy used to... Danielle's head whipped toward him, eyes blazing. Do not speak of your mother right now. Henry fell silent, his shoulders folding inward. Grace bit her lip so hard it turned white, but the tears wouldn't stop. Emily's heart pounded. She looked Danielle straight in the eye, clutching the children tighter. Children have the right to cry when they're hurt. It doesn't make them weak. It makes them human. The silence that followed was electric. Danielle's face flushed with rage. How dare you question me? I'm not questioning you, Emily replied, her voice calm, though her hands shook. I'm protecting them. Danielle's lips curled into a sneer. You're an employee. A temporary one. Don't forget your place, Grace whimpered, her small hands clutching Emily's blouse. Henry whispered, Don't leave us. Emily's chest ached. She kissed the top of Grace's head. I won't, she murmured, but Danielle heard it. Her eyes glittered with triumph. Oh, you will. Because you're done here. Pack your things, Emily. You're finished. The words slammed into Emily like a blow. She tightened her arms around the children, feeling their hearts hammer against her own. You can't fire me, she said quietly. Mr. Harrington hired me. Danielle's smile was venomous. Watch me, and when Richard returns, he'll hear every detail of your insubordination. You'll be gone before the night falls. She turned on her heel and swept away, her robe trailing like a victory banner. Emily sank down against the wall, the twins clinging to her. Her own tears burned hot behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Instead, she kissed each child's temple and whispered, No matter what happens, you are loved. Do you hear me? You are loved. That evening, Richard returned. The yacht was unusually quiet, a tension in the air that prickled his instincts. Danielle greeted him on the deck with a martini already in hand, her face set in a mask of calm. Rough day, she purred. Exhausting, Richard admitted, loosening his tie. Where are the children? In their rooms. We had issues today, Richard frowned. What kind of issues? Danielle sighed dramatically, pressing a hand to her temple. It's Emily. She undermined me in front of them, encouraged their defiance, tried to play mother when all she was hired to do was clean. Richard stiffened. Emily, she did that? She even told the children it was fine to cry over the smallest things, that rules don't matter. Richard, she's filling their heads with nonsense. If we let this go on, they'll grow up spoiled and entitled. Richard's eyes darkened, his jaw tightening. I'll speak to her. Emily was in the children's room, tucking them into bed with gentle hands. She had spent the evening holding them close, reading stories, humming lullabies, knowing it might be her last chance. Grace clutched the porcelain doll, Henry the friendship bracelet Emily had braided from scraps of yarn she found. Will you still be here tomorrow? Grace whispered. Emily's throat closed. She smoothed the child's hair back. I don't know, sweetheart. But even if I'm not here, remember what I told you. You are loved, always. The knock on the door made her flinch. Richard stood there, his expression unreadable. Behind him, Danielle lingered with a smile sharp enough to cut. Emily, Richard said, I need a word with you, alone. Her heart sank, but she nodded. She kissed the children goodnight, their tiny arms clutching her desperately, then followed Richard down the hallway. In his office, surrounded by shelves of leather-bound books and the soft ticking of a clock, Richard closed the door. He turned to face her, his eyes cold. Danielle told me what happened today, he said. Emily swallowed hard. Then you should hear my side too. And in that moment, standing in the dim office, with Danielle eavesdropping just beyond the door, Emily realized the quiet battle she had been drawn into was no longer quiet. It was war, and the battleground was the hearts of two children who desperately needed someone to fight for them. The office on the Harrington yacht was a place built for intimidation. Polished mahogany walls, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with thick law volumes no one had opened in years, a globe bar stocked with rare whiskey. A single lamp cast golden light across Richard Harrington's desk, highlighting the frown line etched deep between his brows. Emily stood near the door, clutching her hands together to stop them from trembling. The soft hum of the yacht's engines filled the silence, punctuated only by the tick of the brass clock on the wall. Outside, waves slapped against the hull, steady and indifferent, as though the world had no concern for what was unraveling within these walls. Richard leaned against his desk, arms crossed, his gaze sharp and heavy. "Danielle told me you overstepped today." Emily took a breath. "Don't cry, not now. With respect, Mr. Harrington, I didn't overstep." Grace fell, scraped her knee. She was terrified. "I comforted her, that's all." "Comfort," Richard repeated slowly, the word heavy with skepticism. "Danielle said you contradicted her. In front of the children." Emily's voice shook, but she pressed on. "She told Grace to stop crying, that it was just drama. She told Henry not to speak of his mother. They're 5 years old, Mr. Harrington. They lost their mom. They need tenderness, not silence." For the first time his expression faltered, but he quickly masked it, pushing himself upright. "Emily, you were hired for housekeeping duties. Cleaning, organizing. Not parenting." "I know," Emily said, her throat tightening. "But when I see 2 little kids hurting, I can't just look away. I wouldn't be human if I did." Richard paced toward the window, staring out at the endless black water dotted with silver moonlight. His reflection in the glass looked older, wearier. "You don't understand. Danielle has been here for 2 years. She knows their routines, their needs. She gives them stability." Emily's eyes burned. "Stability isn't the same as love." The words hung in the air, trembling like a string pulled too tight. Richard turned sharply, his face stormy. "And what makes you think you know what my children need?" Emily met his gaze, her voice quiet but steady. "Because I listen to them. I watch how they shrink when she walks into the room. I see how they eat too fast, like someone might take the food away. I hear Grace whisper at night that she'll try harder if only you keep me around. They're begging for love, Mr. Harrington. They're begging for you." His jaw clenched. He turned away again, gripping the edge of the desk so hard his knuckles whitened. For a moment the only sound was his uneven breathing. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, but colder too. "Emily, you have no children, no experience raising them. You've been here less than a week, and now you're standing here, telling me how to run my family." Her chest ached, but she forced herself to reply. "I'm not telling you how to run your family. I'm asking you to see your children. Really see them." The silence pressed down on both of them. Finally, Richard exhaled, long and weary. "Pack your things. You'll leave in the morning." Emily's world tilted. She felt the blood drain from her face, but she lifted her chin. "If that's what you want. But before I go, look at them. Watch how they act when she speaks to them. And then ask yourself if stability is worth their fear." She turned toward the door, fighting to keep her steps steady. When she opened it, Danielle was standing just beyond, feigning surprise. Though her satisfied smile betrayed her, she leaned against the doorframe, her perfume a sickly sweet cloud. "Well," she said smoothly, "that seemed to go as expected." Emily brushed past her without a word, returning to her small cabin. That night was endless. Emily sat on the edge of her cot, her meager belongings folded neatly in a borrowed suitcase. The sound of the waves outside usually soothed her, but tonight it felt like a countdown, each slap against the hull, marking the hours until she would be cast off. In the children's quarters, Grace and Henry lay awake. The walls of the yacht were thin, and they had heard enough of the argument to know what was coming. "She's leaving," Grace whispered, clutching her porcelain doll. Henry swallowed hard. "It's our fault. We made too much trouble." "No," Grace said fiercely, her little voice trembling. "It's Danielle's fault. She hates us." "She'll win," Henry muttered, sounding far older than his years. "She always wins." The 2 siblings huddled together under the covers, whispering promises to remember Emily forever, even if she never came back. Morning arrived with wind whipping across the sound, rattling the rigging of the yacht. Emily carried her suitcase up to the deck, her heart heavy. She had barely slept. Henry sat slumped in a chair near the railing, staring at the restless waves. His face was pale, his eyes shadowed with grief too heavy for a 5-year-old. "Good morning, Henry," Emily said softly. He looked up, his lip quivering. "You're really going?" "I have to," Emily whispered. Because of us? She dropped her bag and knelt before him, taking his small hands in hers. Never. Don't you dare believe that. You and Grace are the most special children I've ever met. If I'm leaving, it's because adults sometimes make choices that don't make sense. Not because of you. His eyes filled with tears. Do you care about us? Emily's throat closed. More than anything. Grace appeared then, her face blotchy from crying. She ran straight into Emily's arms, clinging with desperate strength. I'll be good, I promise. I'll eat the eggs. I'll stop crying. Just don't go! Emily rocked her gently. Oh, sweetheart, you don't have to earn love. You're already perfect. Behind them, Richard appeared at the doorway, his expression unreadable. He had intended to stay silent, to remain firm in his decision. But the sight of his daughter begging, clutching Emily like a lifeline, made something inside him crack. Daddy, Grace sobbed, spotting him. Don't let her go, please. She makes us safe. Henry moved to his father's side, tugging on his sleeve. She cares about us when no one else does. His voice dropped to a whisper. Danielle doesn't. She's mean when you're not here. Richard's chest tightened painfully. He looked from his children's tear-streaked faces to Emily's weary eyes. For a heartbeat he saw his late wife, Mariana. In the way Emily bent protectively over the children, gentle, fierce, unyielding in her love. But before he could speak, Danielle swept onto the deck, her heels clicking like gunfire. She was immaculate, every hair in place, her smile brittle. What is this spectacle? She demanded. The children are saying goodbye, Richard said stiffly. Good, Danielle replied. It's for the best. Emily's presence has been disruptive. We need order, not chaos. Grace's small voice rose, clear and trembling. I don't like you. The deck fell silent. Danielle froze, her eyes narrowing. What did you say? Henry stepped forward, his chin trembling but lifted. She's mean to us, Daddy. She says food is a privilege. She says crying is bad. She said it was our fault Emily had to leave. Richard's heart lurched. He looked sharply at Danielle. Is that true? Danielle's laugh was brittle. Richard, they're children. They're confused. Emily has filled their heads with nonsense. But Henry's voice cut through. No, we're not lying. We want Emily, not her. The truth echoed across the deck, raw and unpolished. Grace clung tighter to Emily, who held both children close, her own tears silent. Richard stared at Danielle, really staring, as though seeing her for the first time. And in that moment he realized he had allowed her to dictate not just his household, but his children's happiness. His chest burned with shame. Danielle faltered under his gaze, her mask slipping. Richard, you're not going to believe them over me, are you? The silence stretched, the wind whipping around them until Richard spoke. His voice was quiet but resolute. I don't know what I believe yet, but I know this. Something is deeply wrong here, and I'm going to find out what. Danielle's face hardened, her lips pressed into a thin, bloodless line. Emily met Richard's gaze across the deck, her heart pounding. For the first time, she saw uncertainty crack his armor. The battle for Grace and Henry's future had just begun. The day after Emily's near dismissal dawned restless. Clouds gathered over the Long Island Sound, smearing the horizon with shades of steel gray. The Harrington yacht rocked against its anchor, creaking as if aware of the tension that had settled over its decks. Richard Harrington hadn't slept. He spent the night pacing his office, bourbon in hand, staring at family portraits he hadn't truly looked at in years. Photos of Grace and Henry with their mother, Mariana, stared back at him, Mariana's warm smile, her eyes shining with the kind of love Danielle could never replicate. He remembered her laughter on mornings when the twins were toddlers, when pancake batter smeared their faces, when chaos reigned, but love made it beautiful. Back then his life had been messy but alive. After Mariana's death he had chosen order, structure, an illusion of control. Danielle had provided that illusion, but now his children's voices echoed in his head. She's mean when you're not here. Food is a privilege. Don't let Emily go. She makes us safe, By sunrise, Richard knew he could no longer ignore what was right in front of him. In the children's cabin, Emily sat on the floor, braiding Grace's hair while Henry tinkered with a set of toy cars. She knew she should be packing her final things, but she couldn't bring herself to leave them just yet. The bond had already rooted too deep, Miss Emily. Grace's small voice was hesitant. "If you go, will you forget us?" Emily's throat tightened. She smoothed the braid gently. "Sweetheart, some people you never forget. You'll always be in my heart even if I'm far away." Henry looked up sharply, his brows furrowed. "But hearts can't hold people. They're too small." Emily smiled sadly. But hearts are bigger than they look. Big enough to hold love forever." Henry's eyes softened, but he didn't smile. "Then why does Daddy keep choosing Danielle if he loves us?" The question landed like a stone in Emily's chest. She had no answer that wouldn't wound them further, so she hugged them both tight instead. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, but mistakes can be fixed. You just have to be brave enough to tell the truth." That afternoon, Danielle made her move. She waited until Richard returned from a brief meeting ashore, then cornered him in the lounge. She wore a pale blue sheath dress, her makeup flawless, her voice sweet as honey, but her words were poison. "Richard, you can't let this continue. Emily is dangerous for the children. They're clinging to her in unhealthy ways. They need discipline, not dependency." Richard poured himself a drink, but didn't respond. Danielle pressed on, her eyes sharp. "She's undermining me at every turn. If you don't act, she'll destroy the stability we've built. Think of what the board will say if they see chaos in your household. It's bad for your reputation, bad for business." That word, business, snapped something inside Richard. He turned slowly, his gaze hard. "They're not a business, Danielle. They're my children." For the first time, Danielle faltered, but she quickly recovered, stepping closer, laying a manicured hand on his arm. "Exactly. And they need us. Together. Don't let some maid ruin everything we've worked for." Richard stared at her hand, then at her face. "You keep saying we, but Danielle, what exactly have you been working for?" The question sliced through her mask. She stiffened, pulling her hand back. Her eyes flickered, calculating. "For you, for this family." But Richard had already turned away. For the first time in 2 years, doubt had planted itself firmly in his chest. That evening, a storm rolled in. Rain lashed against the yacht's windows. The wind howled through the rigging. The children were restless, frightened by the thunder. Emily gathered them in the playroom, wrapping a blanket around their small bodies. "Do you want me to tell you a story?" she asked. Grace nodded eagerly. Henry leaned against her side. So Emily told them a story Rosa had told her as a child, about a lighthouse keeper's daughter who braved storms to keep the light burning, guiding sailors home. Her voice rose and fell with the rhythm of the storm, and the children's eyes grew heavy, their fear easing into drowsy peace. Unseen by them, Richard stood in the doorway, watching. He saw Emily's patience, her gentleness, her strength. He saw how naturally his children leaned into her, how safe they looked. Something cracked inside him, a truth he had been denying. His children were happiest with her, but standing in the shadows behind him, Danielle saw it too. And for the first time, fear glimmered in her eyes. The next morning, Danielle struck with a new weapon, words sharpened into lies. She phoned a well-known gossip journalist she had cultivated over the years. Her voice dripped with false sorrow. "I'm worried for Richard Harrington," she said. "He's vulnerable. There's a maid, Emily Carter, who's manipulating him through his children. I think she's after his fortune. Someone needs to know before those children get hurt." The journalist purred with interest. "Tell me everything." Danielle did. She spun half-truths into poison, painting Emily as a schemer, a wolf in plain clothes. She knew the story would explode across society pages within days. But Danielle underestimated one thing: Grace and Henry. That same afternoon, while Emily was folding laundry in the cabin, Grace tugged on her sleeve. "Miss Emily, can we make a video?" Emily frowned. "What kind of video?" "To tell the truth," Henry said firmly. "About you." "About Danielle. So people know." Emily blinked, startled by their determination. Sweethearts, it's not that simple, but the children were insistent. Please, Daddy always says truth is important. If we tell the truth, maybe he'll believe us. Emily hesitated, torn. It wasn't her place. Yet when she looked into their eyes, filled with both fear and hope, she couldn't refuse. That evening, as the sun dipped behind storm clouds, Richard returned to find the children in the lounge, a phone propped on the table. Emily sat between them, but it was Grace who spoke, her small voice steady. "My name is Grace Harrington. This is my brother Henry. We want to say something important. People are saying Miss Emily's bad, that she makes us lie. That's not true. She's the only one who makes us feel safe." Henry leaned forward, his eyes fierce. "Miss Emily never yells. She never takes our food. She never tells us we're bad. She hugs us when we're sad. She tells us stories. She listens. That's what a mom does. Danielle doesn't do that." Richard froze in the doorway, his breath caught. He hadn't expected this. His children, his usually quiet, obedient children, were speaking raw truth into a camera for the world. Emily tried to intervene, her voice gentle. "Okay, that's enough," but Grace shook her head. "No, people have to know. We love her, and we want her to stay." The video ended in silence. Richard stepped into the room, his eyes glistening. "Who told you to do this?" he asked softly. "We did," Henry replied. "Because no one listens when we talk. But maybe they'll listen now." Richard's heart clenched. For the first time in years, he saw his children's courage and his own failures reflected back at him. He looked at Emily, who sat frozen, guilt and fear written across her face. But all he felt was gratitude. "Thank you," he whispered, "for giving them back their voices." Far above them in the master suite, Danielle watched from a hidden corner, her nails digging into her palms until they bled. Her carefully constructed world was crumbling, and Emily Carter was at the center of it, but Danielle Harrington was not finished. Not yet. The storm outside had calmed by morning, but inside the Harrington yacht, the storm had only begun. The first blow came with a phone call. Richard Harrington sat at the breakfast table with his coffee untouched, the newspaper folded neatly by his plate. Grace and Henry were in the playroom, Emily nearby arranging their toys, her laughter drifting faintly through the hall. For the first time in days, there was warmth in the air. Then Richard's phone buzzed. The name on the screen made his gut twist. Marina Teague, society journalist for New York Exclusive, infamous for destroying reputations with a single article. He answered cautiously. "This is Richard." Her voice was smooth as velvet, yet sharp as a knife. "Mr. Harrington, I wanted to give you the courtesy of commenting before tomorrow's issue. I've received troubling information about your household." Richard's knuckles whitened around his cup. "What kind of information?" "About your new housemaid, Emily Carter. Sources allege she's been manipulating your children, undermining your partner, and positioning herself as more than just staff. Some are even suggesting she's targeting you for your wealth. Surely you'd like to clarify before this goes public?" The words struck like cold iron. Richard's jaw clenched. "Who told you this?" "Oh, Mr. Harrington, you know I can't reveal sources. But the allegations are serious. My readers will want to know why a vulnerable widower would expose his children to such instability." He ended the call without replying, his chest heaving with fury. He didn't need to ask who had planted the poison. Danielle's handprints were all over it. Upstairs, Danielle was already preparing for battle. She stood before the mirror, applying lipstick with steady hands. Her reflection smiled back at her, calm, composed, untouchable. That was the image she intended to project, no matter what storm broke around her. When Richard stormed into the suite without knocking, she turned gracefully as though expecting him. "Good morning," she purred. "Did you call Marina Teague?" His voice was steel. Danielle tilted her head, feigning innocence. "Why would I do that?" "Because she repeated your words, almost verbatim." His fists clenched. "You're trying to ruin Emily." Danielle's mask cracked for only a second before she slipped it back on. "Richard, I'm trying to protect you. And your children. That girl is dangerous. Can't you see how quickly they've latched onto her?" "It's not healthy." Richard's eyes darkened. No, what's not healthy is the way they flinch when you speak. What's not healthy is them begging me not to send Emily away. Danielle's smile faltered. They're children. Children exaggerate. They don't invent fear. His voice dropped, heavy with quiet rage. I've been blind too long, but not anymore. Downstairs, Emily felt the tension long before she saw it. She noticed the way staff whispered in corners, the way the captain avoided her eyes. When she stepped into the kitchen, one of the stewards thrust a newspaper draft into her hands, his expression stricken. The headline made her stomach drop. Harrington heirloom in jeopardy? Widow's maid manipulates household. Beneath it, her name, her photograph, grainy, likely pulled from her agency file, and line after line of venom, unqualified, opportunistic, preying on grief. Her knees nearly buckled. She gripped the counter, fighting for breath. What would her mother think back in their tiny Queen's apartment? What would the neighbors say when they saw her face plastered across gossip columns? She could almost hear the whispers. She trapped a rich widower. She's after his money. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she swallowed them. In the next room, Grace and Henry were building a fort out of cushions, their giggles bright and unguarded. They didn't know, not yet, and she couldn't let them see her break. That afternoon, Richard called a meeting in the yacht's grand lounge. The rain had cleared, sunlight spilling across the floor-to-ceiling windows, but the air was heavy with unspoken tension. Emily sat stiffly on one sofa, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Grace and Henry clung to her sides, refusing to let go. Danielle stood near the bar, flawless as ever, her smile cool. Richard paced by the window, his tie loosened, his hair mussed from raking his hands through it. Finally he spoke. I received a call this morning. An article will be published tomorrow about Emily. Lies, slander, meant to destroy her reputation. His eyes sliced toward Danielle. And I don't need to guess who fed them. Danielle lifted her chin. I told the truth. Society deserves to know if its most prominent widower is being manipulated. Emily flinched as though struck. I've never, she began, but Danielle's sharp voice cut across her. Spare us the act. You've wormed your way into his children's hearts, painting me as the villain. Clever, but transparent, Richard's voice thundered. Enough! The room shook with the force of it. Grace whimpered, clutching Emily tighter. Richard knelt in front of his children, his voice softening. Tell me the truth. Do you feel safe with Danielle? The twins exchanged a look. Henry's eyes hardened, his small voice steady. No, Grace whispered. She scares us. But Miss Emily makes us feel safe, Danielle laughed, brittle. Children say anything to please the person coddling them. Richard rose slowly, his eyes blazing. You've lied, manipulated, humiliated them. You convinced me order mattered more than love. And I let you. But I won't anymore. Danielle's mask cracked fully now, her voice rising shrill. So what? You're choosing her? A maid over me? Richard's reply was quiet but final. I'm choosing my children. That night, whispers spread through the yacht. Staff exchanged glances. The crew avoided Danielle's orders. Something had shifted, irrevocable. Emily lay awake in her cabin, the newspaper draft still crumpled in her hands. She knew tomorrow the world would tear her apart. No matter what Richard believed, once the article was printed, her name would be stained forever. She imagined her mother Rosa reading it, disappointment in her eyes. She imagined walking down the street and hearing strangers whisper, "That's the girl who tried to trap Harrington." The thought made her stomach twist. A soft knock startled her. She opened the door to find Richard standing there, weary but resolute. "Come with me," he said quietly. He led her to the upper deck. The night air was cool, the stars sharp above the water. He turned to her, his voice low but firm. "I know what's coming tomorrow, and I won't let you face it alone." Emily shook her head, tears spilling. "It doesn't matter what you say. Once it's printed, it matters to me, and it will matter to the children. They need you. I need you. We'll fight this." Her heart thudded painfully. "Why? Why would you risk everything for me?" Richard's eyes softened, grief and hope mingling there. "Because you remind me of what Mariana gave them, what I lost when she died. You gave it back, and I won't lose it again. For the first time since her mother's death, Emily let herself cry freely, cry not from despair, but from the unbearable weight of being seen, and above them, Danielle watched from the shadows of the upper deck, her fury colder than the night sea. She would not go quietly. The next morning, as the first rays of light struck the Sound, the article hit every major newsstand in Manhattan. The Harrington yacht's name was splashed across the front pages, but something else happened too, something Danielle hadn't anticipated. The video Grace and Henry had made, which Richard had quietly uploaded the night before, began to spread. Thousands of strangers saw two small children speaking from the heart, defending Emily Carter, their voices trembling but true. Comments flooded in. Children don't lie about love. Look at their faces. This is real. Whoever smeared her should be ashamed. And for the first time in her carefully constructed life, Danielle Harrington realized she was losing. Not to wealth, not to power, but to truth. The morning sun over Manhattan was anything but ordinary. On every newsstand, bold black letters screamed across the front pages, Harrington's scandal, millionaire's Maid at the center of controversy. Emily Carter's name was plastered across headlines, accompanied by an old agency photo, her shy smile. Her uncertain eyes, now twisted into a symbol of suspicion. The article claimed, sources allege that young housekeeper Emily Carter has cleverly ingratiated herself into the lives of Richard Harrington's children. Insiders warn this bond may be part of a calculated scheme to secure influence over Harrington's vast fortune. Reports say she often assumes a maternal role, unhealthy and manipulative. According to close associates, every word dripped with poison, painting Emily as a predator. Yet on social media, another story was spreading like wildfire. The video of Grace and Henry, sitting on the yacht's deck, their voices trembling, was being shared millions of times. We're not lying. Miss Emily loves us. She never takes food away. She never says we're bad. She hugs us, she sings to us. We just want her to stay. Their little faces, streaked with tears but glowing with sincerity, pierced the public in a way no article ever could. Comments poured in. Children don't fake emotions like that. This Danielle woman sounds like the real villain. Emily is exactly what those kids need. By noon, the battle lines were drawn, tabloids pushing scandal, but the internet lifting up the children's truth. On the yacht, tension rose like a storm tide. Richard set down his untouched coffee, staring at two conflicting pages, one from the tabloids, the other a printout of the viral video transcript. Danielle entered, heels clicking like gunfire on marble. She carried herself as though she had already won. See, everything I warned you about is finally in black and white. Now the world knows who the real danger is. Richard looked up slowly. His eyes carried a fire she hadn't seen before. You thought lies would carry the day, but people can tell when children are speaking the truth. That's something headlines can't erase. Danielle's face hardened. So what? Now you'll make her part of this family? Richard's voice was calm but immovable. I can't ignore my children's voices anymore. By mid-afternoon, another bombshell hit. A recording surfaced online, an audio clip of Danielle's own conversation with gossip columnist Marina Teixeira. One of the yacht's young stewards, disgusted by Danielle's scheming, had secretly recorded the call. Her voice was unmistakable. She just wants his money. She's manipulating him through the kids. Within hours, the hashtag Justice for Emily was trending worldwide. But Danielle wasn't done. That night, while Emily prepared dinner, Danielle slipped into Grace's room. Her voice was honey laced with venom. Listen carefully. If you keep defending Emily, your father will break. If she leaves, it will be your fault. You'll be the reason you lose both parents. Grace's lip trembled, tears brimming in her wide eyes. From the doorway, Henry stepped in, fists balled. That's not true. You always lie. Danielle's face twisted. Do you really think you can stand against me? The door opened. Richard stood there, face dark, jaw set. He had heard everything. Grace ran into his arms, sobbing. Richard's voice was low and lethal. I thought maybe there was some humanity left in you. But threatening children? Danielle flinched, but tried to recover. They're turning against me because of her. Don't you see? Emily is the one twisting them. Richard shook his head slowly. His voice cut like steel. The only one twisting them is you. Later that night, Emily stood alone on the deck, staring at the endless ocean. The tabloids, the lies, the weight of a world too powerful for her to fight. It all pressed against her chest like iron. A warm hand rested on her shoulder. Richard, you think your name is finished, he said quietly. But I won't let this end you. You're not alone in this. Her eyes glistened. Why are you protecting me so much? He looked at the horizon, his voice steady. Because for the first time in years, my children are laughing again. And that laughter came back because of you. If I stay silent now, I stop being their father. From the cabin door, two small faces peeked out, Grace and Henry, listening, their lips curling into shy smiles. For the first time they felt hope, but Danielle wasn't finished. The next morning, she left the yacht in secret. In her hand was a folder. She was headed to a lawyer's office. Her plan, launch a custody battle. If she couldn't destroy Emily with rumors, she would drag the children into the courts. Danielle's lips curved into a cold smile. The war was only just beginning. The next week unfolded like a carefully staged drama, but this time, Danielle was the director. Early Monday morning, a sleek black town car pulled up to the marina. Two men in tailored suits stepped out, briefcases in hand. They weren't here to discuss business with Richard. They carried documents stamped with the seal of the New York family court. When the knock came at the yacht's polished steel door, Emily froze. She had been helping Grace braid her doll's hair, while Henry sat cross-legged on the carpet building a Lego fortress. The sound of that heavy knock carried an unfamiliar weight, the kind that made her stomach twist. Richard answered, expecting perhaps a delivery or a visitor. Instead, he was met with the stony faces of attorneys. Mr. Harrington, the taller one said crisply, "You've been served." He handed over a thick envelope. Richard's brow furrowed as he tore it open. His eyes scanned the first page, and color drained from his face. Petition for guardianship review and custody concerns, filed by Danielle Whitmore. The claim, Richard Harrington, widowed father, was unfit to provide a stable environment for his children due to emotional manipulation by a household employee. Danielle requested temporary guardianship rights until the matter could be properly investigated. Emily's heart pounded as she read over Richard's shoulder. Her name leapt out from the pages like a curse. Emily Carter, employee of questionable background, accused of exerting undue influence over minors. Grace tugged at Emily's sleeve. "What's happening?" she whispered. Emily forced a smile. "Nothing you need to worry about, sweetheart." But inside, panic clawed at her ribs. That evening, the yacht became a fortress of whispers. Richard sat at the mahogany dining table, papers spread before him, his jaw tight. Across from him sat his longtime lawyer, Mitchell Harris, a man with silver hair and the kind of measured calm you only earned after 30 years in Manhattan courtrooms. "Richard," Mitchell said gravely, "this isn't just a nuisance filing. Danielle has connections. She's painting Emily as a manipulator and you as negligent. If the judge entertains this, it could drag on for months." Richard's fists clenched. "She's lying. She's using the children as pawns. The court has to see through this." Mitchell sighed. "Courts don't always see through things. They look at appearances. And right now, the appearance is a wealthy widower being distracted by a young housekeeper. Danielle will exploit every prejudice in the book." Emily sat quietly at the edge of the room, hands knotted in her lap. She felt like she was the one standing trial, though the fight hadn't even begun. "Mr. Harris," she said softly, "if me leaving would end this—" "No." Richard's voice thundered so sharply Grace flinched. He softened at once, lowering his tone. "No, Emily, you're not running. Not again. My children need you. I need you." For a moment the room was heavy with silence. Mitchell removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Then we prepare. But be ready, the tabloids will double down. Danielle will use every dirty trick she has. She's not just after you, Emily. She's after the children, because through them, she controls Richard. The storm broke the very next morning. Across cable networks, Danielle appeared in a pressed white suit, seated gracefully beside her lawyer. Cameras flashed as she spoke in a voice dripping with polished sorrow. I love Grace and Henry, as if they were my own, she declared. But recently, they've been manipulated by someone with no qualifications, no family values, no stability. Richard is a wonderful man, but he's vulnerable after losing his wife. My only concern is the well-being of the children. Clips of Emily, grainy photos taken by paparazzi, her holding Grace's hand on the deck, her hugging Henry after a nightmare, were plastered on screen with captions like, "Who is Emily Carter? Angel or opportunist?" Emily watched it unfold from the yacht's lounge. Her chest felt like it was being crushed. Grace crawled into her lap, whispering, "They're saying bad things about you." Emily kissed the top of her head, fighting back tears. "I know, honey, but the truth always finds its way." Henry looked up from the couch. "We can tell them the truth. We can talk to the judge." His little fists were clenched, his face flushed with determination. "We're not scared." Richard, standing by the window, turned to Mitchell. "Can they testify? Children this young?" Mitchell shook his head. "It's risky. The court may not accept their words as reliable. And even if they did, it could traumatize them." Emily looked down at Grace and Henry, both staring at her with wide, trusting eyes. She felt the weight of their faith pressing into her bones. How do I protect them from a war they never asked for? The days that followed blurred into a nightmare of reporters swarming the marina, headlines spinning wilder tales, and Danielle orchestrating each move like a general leading troops. But something unexpected began to happen. Neighbors from Emily's old Queens neighborhood started speaking out. A local pastor wrote a letter defending her character, recalling the countless times she had volunteered at the church daycare. An elderly woman, Mrs. Romano, gave an interview saying, "Emily raised half the block's kids when their parents worked double shifts. She's nothing but love." The narrative started to shift, and then came the breaking point. One grey Thursday morning, Grace collapsed into tears at breakfast. "I had a dream the judge took us away from Miss Emily," she sobbed, clutching her doll. Henry pushed his cereal bowl aside, eyes blazing. "We won't let them. We'll tell everyone, even if they don't believe kids." Emily hugged them both tight. "You don't have to fight this battle. That's my job." But Richard, watching his children cling to Emily, felt a surge of rage, unlike any he'd ever known. He slammed his hand on the table. "Enough! Danielle wants a war. She'll get one. But this time on my terms." Mitchell raised a brow. "Meaning?" Richard's voice was cold as steel. "Meaning I'll drag every truth into the light. If she wants to play dirty, we'll show the world exactly who Danielle really is." That afternoon, Richard called an emergency press conference. Cameras crowded the marina as he stood with Emily beside him and his children holding each of their hands. His voice carried across the deck, firm, unshaken. "For too long, my family has been haunted by lies. My late wife raised me to believe that love is the only measure of a parent's worth. Emily Carter has shown my children more love and care in a matter of weeks than some people manage in a lifetime. Danielle Whitmore claims to care for Grace and Henry, but her actions, threatening them, belittling them, manipulating them, prove otherwise. My children will not be weapons in her ambition." Reporters erupted in questions, flashes blinding the deck. Grace clung tighter to Emily while Henry shouted boldly, "She's telling the truth. Miss Emily is our family." The image, two small children clinging to a young woman, with their powerful father standing protectively behind them, flooded news outlets within the hour. In her penthouse across the city, Danielle hurled a glass against the wall as she watched. For the first time, her reflection in the mirror showed not triumph, but desperation. The battle for Grace and Henry had just entered its fiercest stage. And Danielle realized, perhaps too late, that Emily was no longer just a housekeeper. She had become the heart of a family willing to fight for her, and sometimes the truth had sharper teeth than any lie. The day of the custody hearing arrived with a weight that seemed to hang over the entire city. The courthouse in downtown Manhattan was an imposing granite structure, its columns stretching into the sky like silent judges of their own. Outside, cameras flashed in relentless bursts. Reporters jostled one another, microphones shoved toward anyone even remotely connected to the Harrington name. Inside the courthouse, the air was thick with whispers and tension. Emily sat quietly on a wooden bench, her hands folded in her lap, though they trembled despite her best efforts. She had never stepped foot in a courtroom before. Now her entire life seemed to dangle on the words spoken within these walls. Beside her, Grace clutched the hem of her dress, eyes wide, while Henry sat stiff, trying to act braver than his 5 years allowed. Richard placed a steadying hand on each of his children's shoulders. "You don't have to be afraid," he whispered, though he himself felt the pounding in his chest. Across the aisle, Danielle appeared in pristine white, her suit tailored to perfection, her blonde hair gleaming under the courtroom lights. She looked every bit the part of a grieving would-be savior, except for the faint curl at the corner of her lips that betrayed her satisfaction. Her lawyer, a sharp-featured man named Lowell Grant, spread out documents like a magician preparing tricks. Mitchell Harris, Richard's lawyer, sat quietly with a thick folder of evidence, his expression calm but watchful. When the judge entered, all rose. Judge Eleanor Stanton was a woman in her early 60s, her silver hair tied neatly at the back, her gaze sharp and uncompromising. She settled into her seat, adjusted her glasses, and glanced down at the case file. "This is the matter of Whitmore versus Harrington," she began, her voice carrying through the chamber. "Concerning the guardianship and welfare of minors, Grace Harrington and Henry Harrington." Emily's breath caught in her throat as her name was read into the record. She felt exposed, as though the whole city was staring directly at her heart. Danielle's attorney rose first. "Your Honor, my client, Ms. Whitmore, has been a stable presence in the Harrington children's lives since the tragic passing of their mother. She has managed their household, their routines, their education. But recently, an employee, a housekeeper of questionable background, has inappropriately inserted herself into the role of mother. This has caused confusion, instability, and emotional harm to the children. We are here today to prevent further damage." Every word struck Emily like a lash, but she held her head high, refusing to let her tears fall. Mitchell Harris stood slowly, buttoning his suit jacket. "Your Honor, the truth is far simpler. The children are not confused. They are loved. They are not harmed. They are healing. Emily Carter has shown these children compassion when others offered control, comfort when others gave cruelty. We will present evidence that it is not Ms. Carter who threatens their well-being, but Ms. Whitmore herself." Witnesses were called. First came the yacht steward, a young man who had secretly recorded Danielle's conversation with the gossip columnist. The courtroom fell silent as the audio was played aloud. Danielle's own voice, cold and calculating. "She just wants his money. She's manipulating him through the kids." Danielle shifted in her chair, her jaw tightening, but she forced a mask of indifference. Next, Mrs. Romano, the elderly neighbor from Queens, took the stand. She leaned on her cane, her voice trembling but resolute. "Emily raised half the block's kids when their parents worked nights. She never asked for a dime. I'd trust her with my life, and I'm proud she's here today." Richard's pastor followed, testifying about Emily's years of volunteer work at the church daycare. A flood of letters of support had been submitted from neighbors, co-workers, even teachers, who had seen Emily reading to children in the library. The stack of endorsements painted a picture far brighter than Danielle could smear. Still, Lowell Grant pressed his attack. "Miss Carter, is it true you live with your sick mother in a modest apartment? That you've worked in low-wage jobs since high school? Wouldn't it be tempting, perhaps even natural, for someone like you to use this situation to elevate your circumstances?" Emily's voice shook but did not break. Yes, I live with my mother. Yes, I've worked hard all my life. But love doesn't have a price tag. I didn't ask to be loved by those children. They chose me. And I would protect them even if it meant losing everything I have, the courtroom murmured at her words. Judge Stanton's eyes narrowed, studying Emily with fresh interest. Then came the moment no one had expected. Henry tugged on Richard's sleeve, whispering fiercely. "I want to talk." Richard looked alarmed. "Son, this isn't—" Judge Stanton noticed. "Mr. Harrington, does your child wish to speak?" Mitchell hesitated, but Richard, seeing the determination in Henry's eyes, nodded slowly. Little Henry was lifted onto the witness chair. His feet didn't reach the ground. His voice wavered at first, but his words carried like arrows. "Miss Emily. She makes us feel safe. She makes pancakes shaped like stars. She sings when I have bad dreams. Mommy used to sing too. Miss Emily doesn't yell. She doesn't say we're bad. She hugs us." His small hands clenched the edge of the chair. "Miss Danielle says we don't deserve food if we're naughty. She says crying is for babies. But I'm 5 and sometimes I cry. That doesn't mean I'm bad." The courtroom was stunned into silence. Grace, unable to sit still any longer, scrambled to her feet and called out, "She's right. Miss Emily loves us. Please don't take her away." The bailiff moved as if to restore order, but Judge Stanton lifted a hand. Her gaze softened briefly as she looked at the 2 children. Danielle's mask cracked. She shot to her feet, her voice shrill. "They're children. They don't understand. They've been brainwashed." Judge Stanton's gavel slammed. "Enough, Miss Whitmore. Sit down." The room vibrated with tension. Danielle sat, but her face twisted in fury, the image of control slipping from her fingers. Closing arguments echoed through the chamber. Lowell Grant insisted Emily was an interloper, a risk, a temptation. He painted her as a schemer cloaked in innocence. But Mitchell Harris's words struck deeper. "Your Honor, children do not fabricate love. They know when they are cherished and when they are dismissed. This court must decide not whether Emily Carter fits into the Harrington family, but whether the Harrington children deserve to keep the one person who has restored their joy. Love is not manipulation. It is survival. And Grace and Henry have survived because of Emily." The judge retired to chambers. Minutes stretched into hours. Outside, reporters speculated wildly. Inside, Emily sat clutching the children's hands, whispering prayers under her breath. Richard paced like a caged lion, every tick of the clock a knife to his nerves. Finally, Judge Stanton returned. The courtroom stilled. "I have considered the testimony, the evidence, and most importantly, the voices of the children themselves," she began. Her voice was steady, deliberate. "It is this court's ruling that custody remains fully with Richard Harrington. The petition for guardianship filed by Ms. Whitmore is hereby denied." Gasps filled the air. Grace squealed with joy, hugging Emily's waist. Henry grinned for the first time in weeks. Richard closed his eyes, relief crashing over him, but the judge wasn't finished. "Furthermore, I find Ms. Whitmore's conduct deeply troubling. Threatening, belittling, and manipulating minors is unacceptable. Any further attempt to interfere with this family will be met with legal consequences." Danielle's face drained of color. She rose as if to object, but no words came. For the first time, she was speechless. Outside the courthouse, cameras caught the moment Emily stepped into the sunlight, Grace holding one hand, Henry the other. Richard stood beside them, his arm protectively around Emily's shoulders. The picture was unmistakable. Not employer and employee, not millionaire and maid, but family. The crowd erupted in cheers as chants of "Justice for Emily" filled the air. For Emily, it felt like breathing after being underwater too long. She had not sought this fight, but she had survived it. More importantly, Grace and Henry had survived it. That night, back on the yacht, Richard raised a glass of water, his voice thick with emotion. "To the truth, to family, and to Emily, who reminded us what love really means." Grace and Henry clinked their juice cups against his glass, giggling. Emily blushed, her heart swelling, tears prickling her eyes. For the first time since she had set foot on the Harrington yacht, she allowed herself to believe. She wasn't just passing through their lives. She belonged. And somewhere in the city, behind closed doors, Danielle sat alone in her penthouse, staring at her reflection in the darkened window. For all her power, all her wealth, she had lost the one battle she never thought she could, against the truth spoken by children. The war was over, and Emily had won.